This is Investment Tanking having a look at the new Tier 8 Clan Wars reward tank, the IS-5. If there was a tank equivalent to fusion food, the IS-5 is it. The IS-4 had sexy times with the IS-3 and birthed a terrifying monster that finally fills the gap in many of our IS collections. The main difference to this tank from its closest Tier 8 relative, the IS-3, is the change in armour. Gaining the looks and frontal armour of the IS-8 but some of the side armour of the IS-4. That leaves it with a very well angled 120mm pike nose at the front and also a whopping 120mm on the side. That's the second highest side armour value of the Tier 8 heavies behind the KV-4 and 5, which both have 150. I've never tried it, but this could follow in the KV-5's footsteps of being a reverse side scraping master. Now, I say reverse side scraping because if you try it frontally with a pike, you'd just negate the armour values of the front and give them a nice easy weak spot to shoot at. The enhanced thickness of the pike brings it up to above the IS-3's, to the armour of the 110 Chinese Heavy, although the angling on the 110 still remains much more effective. This puts a nice little middle ground between the two. When you take mobility into consideration, it surprisingly gets the 4th spot in terms of power to weight ratio, sitting just behind the 50T, 5100 and the VK4502A at 14.27 horsepower a tonne. What used to be 4th? The IS-3 with 14.26, a whole 0.01 extra. Whoa. Its top speed is higher than the IS-3 at 42 km an hour, but due to its horrific terrain resistance, it's actually slower to accelerate considerably. So far it's a heavier, more sluggish IS-3. If this follows the pattern of the Russian premium Tier 8s, the penetration should be awful. But no, for a change, the famous D25TA gets an APCR standard round of 221mm penetration, and the premium has 270mm worth of heat. Couple this with the average Russian Alpha of 390, and a fire rate between the IS-6 and IS-3, you get a fairly solid tank all round. With vents, rammer, brothers in arms, the IS-5 achieves around a 10.4 second reload, just edging out the IS-3 in terms of DPM. Unfortunately, to balance out the APCR round, the gun's been given the accuracy of the IS-6 at 0.46 at 100 metres. It's not terrible, but you can certainly feel it when playing. A little side bonus to the APCR round is the 1400 metres a second shell velocity, which means at 500 metres, the render range, your shell will take 0.35 seconds to reach its target. It's barely worth leading any shots with that speed. Also, I'm unsure if the APCR round normalises due to its non-premium status. On some Tier 10 mediums, the normalisation penalty isn't so severe as APCR as a standard round. We need to do a little bit more experimenting and or find the numbers from Wargaming for this. Overall, I wouldn't say it's better than the IS-3 or worse, it's just different. The bonus to the armour really helps your survivability and the gun donks out fairly often if not aimed carefully, as seen with this IS-2. It's just a refreshing change to be able to be in a Russian premium, and to be able to go through the turret faces of Tiger 2s without having to switch to premium. In fact, I've only played 10 games so far in this, and I've not shot a single shell of premium heat, even when in Tier 10 games. Yep, Tier 10 games. In the modern style of wargaming, the premiums no longer get preferential matchmaking, meaning you'll get to see games all the way up to Tier 10. Some people may have a moan about this, but considering it has fairly similar penetration to the IS-3, and even more armour, it just wouldn't need preferential. Premiums are meant to be between the stock and elite tank, but the IS-5 is just an elite IS-3 with more armour and a different top gun. There's no downside. If you need a demonstration as an example of the lack of normalisation, or possibility of it, it goes fine through the front of an enemy lover, but If it's even slightly angled or you hit a weirdly angled bit on the side of a tank, it won't normalise itself and go through. If you look here, I hit the side skirt ever so slightly angled bit. Instead of normalising and going through like it would maybe with IS-6's AP round, it instead bounced off. Be careful with APCR, people. And here we have that fantastic shell velocity. It's brilliant for shooting fast, little moving scouts. You don't need to move at all or aim in front. It's just a nice change to derping out when they're circling you. It's a very sexy tank, and the only aesthetic thing I would change is the muzzle brake. It just looks a bit simple. I like the cheese grater of the IS-4 or the Swiss cheese of the IS-7. I've got to stop talking about cheese. But if really needed, it can be swapped out with a skin mod. Finally, moving on to the turret armour, is actually considerably thinner by about 50mm than an IS-3 at 201 frontally, 129 on the sides and 90 on the rear. This doesn't actually matter though, as it's still incredibly steeply angled and will bounce pretty much anything tier 8 and 9 can throw at it. In fact, if you go hull down, you can be a giant pain in the ass to long distance enemies like the T-28 prototype in this game. You got so fed up, you eventually started spamming high explosive at me. So, as to whether it's a good tank, yes, everything it does well. There's no real downside to this tank. As to whether it's worth having, it's a Clan Wars reward tank. It's always worth having just to show off to people. It's like a status symbol. Even if they're not good, they're worth having. As for credits, with around 3,000 damage comes around 100,000 credits. That's really good considering you're going to be spending a lot on ammo. Other than that, spend more gold and keep tanking.
Game over.